Frustration among parents is constantly rising with respect to what is going on within their schools right now. And guess what? It should be, especially when it comes to the issue of critical race theory. Now, we have discussed this before, but we're going to hit this from a different angle today. So I want you to listen to some of the quotes that we're going to present to you from critical race theory advocates, because this is really important in order to combat the narrative that we are constantly being confronted with by the left. We discussed that today on Making the Argument with Nick Freitas, where we make the arguments to defend a free society. Okay, I want to start this off with a story from the General Assembly. And the reason why this story is important is because it illustrates, it's going to be, you're going to notice the way that someone is kind of advocating for a particular view of the world, but they're doing it in somewhat of a subtle way. And this is often the way that we see CRT being pushed. And anytime we bring up some sort of reasonable critique of CRT, all of a sudden we're accused of something that isn't true. So I want to just set the stage here. We're sitting in the General Assembly, so we're on the House floor. It's the first time we've actually been back to the House floor in over a year because of COVID. And we've just gone through a special session that was fairly controversial. And toward the end, one of my colleagues, a Democrat, gets up and he starts talking about disparities within society and disparities that uniquely affect the Black community. And then he goes on to talk about how there's a lot of people that deny this reality. There's a lot of deniers out there, and that we're essentially going to have to wake up to the truth in order to effectively solve the problem. And what's interesting about that is twofold. In one side, he's talking about disparities that exist. But on another side, he's offering a worldview which attempts to explain why those disparities exist. And he's essentially suggesting that if you don't share his worldview, or if you don't think his worldview does the best job of explaining why certain disparities exist, then you're a denier, right? And this term denier is used very specifically because typically we associate that word denier. Now we associate it with climate change, but before that it was with Holocaust deniers. Right? And again, when you use that term, it's to conjure up this image in your head that how could you be so unreasonable, racist, bigoted, mean-spirited, or ignorant to ever believe that the Holocaust didn't exist, or that climate change isn't happening exactly the way that the left wants us to believe it's happening. And now, of course, that if you oppose a particular theory about disparities, well, then it's not just that you have perhaps logical or empirical questions about that theory. No, it's because you're a denier. Right? You're a bad person. You're ignorant, right? And the only way that you can be saved from your ignorance is that if you embrace not only the theory, but all the policy prescriptions that come along with it, right? It's the only way that you can save yourself from essentially being categorized as ignorant, bigoted, racist, etc., right? And this is a common tactic that is used with respect to the narrative surrounding critical race theory. So let's talk about some of the most common left-wing narratives that I've heard and that I've had directed against me whenever this topic of conversation comes up.